Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. The Third Degree Net Podcast.
Third Degree the Podcast is brought to you by Soccer90.com, your ultimate destination for FC Dallas, North Texas Soccer Club, and all the European gear. Browse all the latest arrivals at Soccer90.com. Premier League, Bundesliga, La Liga, everything you want. Listeners of Third Degree the Podcast get 20% off your order when you use code Third Degree at checkout. Some exclusions may apply.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another episode. This one numbered 225, episode 225 of Third Degree, the podcast. Hello again. My name is Peter, and today it's just a two-man show because our favorite Hatter is all nervous about their showdown at Stamford Bridge on Friday against Chelsea. Dan has had to take the evening off from recording as he gets ready to put all of his chips and dips together for the game tomorrow. We're recording this on Thursday evening, so he's very, very busy. And that means I'm solo. Well, not really solo. It's a duo between me and your hero, my hero, and everybody's hero, editor, founder since 1737. The one, the only, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Peter, I believe Dan, this is the day, the annual day that Dan would shave, and it's just taking him hours. So that's why he's not here.
He finally gets to a Texas summer point where he just cannot stand it any longer, and he has to shave it off. He keeps hoping for the first cold front around Labor Day to blow through, and it just seems to come later and later every year. And he's like, "Screw it, I can't do this another month."
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I had to get a haircut today. It was so awful. I can't even imagine having a beard like that.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
It does. It just seems wrong in all the ways, but I admire him for sticking through it. So we will miss Dan today as we will finish up the question and answer session we began in last week's episode. We still have about 10 questions left. Pappy check with a whole bunch of them. Jeff Tepper, Mark Blackwood, Fritz, and Joseph, and a whole bunch of other people still have questions to go through. But before we get to that, let's start off with some of the news and the fact that, well, frankly, Buzz, you've been teasing this like a college sorority girl for the last few days online, that you've had a big chat with Zanotta with a whole bunch of stuff, specifically about the news that you also posted that Reggie Cannon was never paid for by Benfica.
Boa Vista,
Boa Vista. I don't know why I said Boa Vista, the Portuguese club. So it's time apparently now for a Huntsman dump, which we haven't had in a while.
Well, that was a pretty big one. I mean, I'm certainly not the first person to report that they hadn't paid. Certainly among other people, Bogart's done some stuff with that, and he backed up what I had said again, this week, which was that they have yet to pay anything. But I have a little more on that, and I have a little more on a couple other things he told me. It was a nice conversation. This was I don't know if it's annual, but it's.
How did it come about?
Well, this week was the fancy media dinner or luncheon that they occasionally do, where they invite, maybe 20 or so local media to come to a very nice place for lunch. I usually cannot afford to go to.
They invite local media.
Yeah, they do. I don't know why you didn't get invited.
Let me check my spam folder and see if I can fish out my invite.
I will admit it's not a very big list of people that get invited, but I was there and John Arnold was there and a couple other people. But,
how many people? Okay, I'm going to ask this question. How many people from the media showed up to participate in this that regularly discuss, report, cover Football Club Dallas?
Well, a higher percentage this time than usual. The guy who's the digital editor for WFAA, who've been doing a little more content
Pete Friedman?
Lately. I don't know his name. I just know that he's with WFAA, and they've done a little more lately. The new soccer editor for the Morning News was there.
Record scratch. What?
Yeah. Well, they have a person who, among other things, has been assigned soccer. And he supervised, remember the nice piece they had this week on Nico that was written by the LSU kid, right? So he supervised that.
Familiar? No.
Oh, okay. There was a nice piece, like a deep piece, like a deeper dive on Nico and family and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And the kid that wrote it actually is an intern from LSU, but he was supervised by this guy. And then a couple of guys that are Hispanic media that are on the conference calls all the time. Myself, John Arnold, and then from the team it was PR people, of course, but then Dan and Andre Zanotta and the new player Yaramendi, I think perhaps they overestimated like how many people would be interested in talking to him specifically.
Does he speak English?
No,
Oh,
not. You know, I saw a thing where he mentioned he watches TV because he's trying to learn it. You know, but not enough. And they even warned everybody ahead of time you would need a translator. He's not up for that conversation. But
Was there anybody from any of the TV affiliates in attendance?
just the guy from WFAA. That's a TV station, right?
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, he does their website and
Yeah,
social
that was
media
it.
stuff. So interesting.
No, it's about the crowd they usually get. Not too different.
Well, you know.
It was John Arnold's birthday, so I told everybody there that it was and embarrassed him. That was fun.
Did you tell them all he finally broke 25?
Yeah. No, but he reminded me
Babyface
that when
John
he was
Arnold?
a teenager that he had talked to me on Instant Messenger at some point about something relating to I don't know what. I didn't ask him what it was, but we had chatted at some point when he was
a
kid.
young up and coming soccer journalist.
Not even that, like a teenager. Like I think he said he was in high school.
I want to be Buzz Carrick someday.
I'm at least a decade older than him, so it's not surprising. Maybe two.
Interesting.
I don't know how old John is. I never asked him.
Well, that's too bad. I wish I'm jealous that you got invited to such a thing.
Yeah. I should bring you in next time.
I'll ask Andy if he got one.
Yeah, he might have.
I mean, no, I'm sure he didn't because he would have said something to me had he. Andy's been traveling doing CONCACAF Champions League the last 3 weeks. He's been to Belize twice and has been in Jamaica this week.
I've never been to Belize. But
Yes.
at these things before, I've been there with Tobias. I reminded Dan Hunt that we did one with Don Garber, like a decade and a half ago. He was like, "Oh, that's right, yeah." And Steve Davis has been at some of these before. I'm actually surprised you've not been at one. That happens from time to time. These luncheons.
Not that I remember. No.
Oh, okay, all right. You don't rate, I guess.
I'm not super popular inside the front office, though, Buzz.
I'm not
I don't
either,
think
Peter.
if
Come
you've
on.
picked up on this. Well, at least you show up for practice
That's
on a
true.
regular
That's
basis
true.
and
I do.
stuff. You kind of force your
Yep.
way into it. So
Yeah. Well, I doubt I would get invited if I didn't do that stuff.
all right, so that's the background
Zanotta,
on how
yeah.
you got to talk to Zanotta.
Yeah.
So what's all the good?
Well,
the good stuff?
everybody lined up to talk to Dan because they all want to talk about the World Cup. So I just cornered Zanotta, and he gave me a good 5 minutes. More than that, more like 10 minutes.
That's savvy soccer
Yeah.
journalism right there, boys and girls.
They asked me if I wanted a player, and I was like, "Man, I don't know him, and I don't speak Spanish. What am I gonna do? Ask him if he knew it was hot? Come on. I got nothing at this point until I see him play." So, but anyway, let's go back to Zanotta and we'll start with Boa Vista. One thing I thought was fascinating, he said that they've actually filed in FIFA court, whatever it is, twice now on Boa Vista because not only have they not paid the original transfer fee, there was a bonus kicker when Reggie hit a certain number of games that kicked in, and so they had to file again on that one. So they haven't paid either one of them. And now they're basically interest is kicking up, so it's actually more money now than it was originally because interest is compiling because of their failure to pay. Because basically they've been ruled against.
Right?
Yeah, I don't know, but like they've been ruled against. Their Andre Zanotta says that Boa's in a transfer ban. So I went and looked on Team Talk to see like a transfer market and see what they have done. And somehow or another they managed to get a player or two in, but they still have very, very few players transferred. So it effectively is the case that they are into the ban of some kind. They have loaned players that have come back, and they promoted a bunch of academy guys. And other than that, like in the last year and a half, they've had 2 players come in or something. So apparently they probably are in at least some level of transfer ban. Zanotta said it's both internationally and even locally in their league they now can't do it. So we didn't go deep into the details, but obviously it's still a thing. So they still haven't been paid. And he did say that Boa had called and wanted to like try and renegotiate, and they were like, "Nah, we want the money." So we'll see what happens with that. It doesn't mean much for FC Dallas other than it's just crazy that they still haven't got any money for Reggie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a sternly worded letter to the to FIFA.
Well, the other side of the coin is we talked about Reggie, and obviously Zanotta is not his agent or wholly 100% familiar, but he says he's not sure that Reggie would be free agent, which is what I said last week. I think it was because, Boa Vista at some point probably has paid him, all or enough, or if they got it to him late or whatever, they're going to probably contend that he is free. So if you wonder why Reggie hasn't moved, I would imagine that that's really what's going on and that nothing has been decided in his case. And that he's not actually free because the seasons are all starting. He would have, if he'd been free, somebody would have grabbed him.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty confident he's probably not free, or at least not resolved to be free yet. So
that sucks for Reggie.
Yeah. So that's terrible for him, and obviously we feel really bad for him how that's gone. I mean, Europe has obviously not been the answer. That deal at the beginning, when it had the Leal, connection, we thought looked like a really good pathway. It turns out that died fast because that guy.
Yeah, you may want to remind people what that story is.
Yeah, at the time he went to Boa Vista, the idea was that the same owner was buying. I can't remember whether he owned Boa or he owned Leal, one or the other. He was buying the other club.
I think he owned Lille and was considering buying Boa Vista, or at least somehow get a
something
financial
like that. Yeah.
Investment in Boa Vista.
A stake. And the idea was that he was going to go to Boa Vista for a year and then transfer,
to
quote unquote transfer, because they were going to own, same guy was going to own both teams, and then he was going to move to Lille. Well, that didn't happen because I believe that guy ended up selling Lille. So he doesn't even own that team anymore either. So that whole alleged pathway, and this goes to show you too about having things on paper versus handshakes and promises that are worth jack squat. You can in a way look at Brian Reynolds too, who had been told that, you're going to come here to Roma, and you're going to go on loan for 1 year. Then the guy that's the right back net will be moved out, and you'll come in and you'll be the guy. Well, that didn't happen either. They fired their coach. The new guy hates kids, hates Americans, hates offensive defenders.
All three strikes
against. Yeah, so all 3 strikes against Reynolds so that turned into a horrible situation for him. And I'm sure that horrible situation is not over either. By the way, that's probably a story we'll have to get back to eventually. But poor Reggie.
I was thinking about this the other day. Is there a story of a kid that Dallas has sold that I'm just forgetting that has gone spectacularly well?
Well, Tanner's is going pretty damn well. There's
okay.
Isn't Lazio now looking at him maybe to go? And he's like, compare him to Busio, for example, who's not even playing for his second division team, whereas Tanner's become kind of like the guy for them.
Yeah.
So that's pretty close, I think, to going really well.
Well, plus he's playing professional soccer in Venice.
Venice.
Why would you want to go to Turkey or whatever?
Weston.
Weston,
but
they didn't sell Weston.
No,
Weston left on his own. I'm thinking of Reggie. I'm thinking of Pepe. I'm thinking of Brian Reynolds. I'm sure I'm forgetting one, but it just seems like this has been an interesting learning curve for all of us. I think most people who are fans of this club are experiencing for the first time the sale of kids and products and the production line out of the academy, and it's a pretty brutal business, man.
Yeah,
it's pretty evil.
Dante's loan didn't work. Shay's loan didn't work. Pepe's probably back on the right track now, but.
Oh, definitely. But that whatever half season or whatever it was at Augsburg was just brutal.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Miserable.
Chris Richards.
Kid.
Chris Richards. That's gone right.
For the most part, yeah. Although I think he'll end up getting loaned out from Crystal Palace. I don't think he's getting much time over there. So
yeah, he's gotten hurt too much, I think, perhaps.
Yeah, interesting. Well, it's been, like I said, it's been a ride for all of us as we experience. But that I feel bad for Reggie, because Reggie, I think, is genuinely a world-class fellow. But the way it ended here in Dallas, the kind of hustle to get him out of Dallas, it seems like he desperately went to Boa Vista, and then that turned into maybe even a bigger disaster.
Yeah, I probably the biggest measure of that is that he's probably fallen fairly far down the right back pecking order for the national team.
Well, that was part of the disaster of Boa Vista. Is they stopped playing 4 in the back. He started playing right center back.
Yeah, that's not good. I mean, I at this point, I figure, well, maybe Yedlin's probably out of there, but Desta certainly is still in, and Reynolds might have passed him, and Shaq Moore even on certain occasions. So,
yeah.
The
crazy part, now that I think about this, it may turn out that the best result for any player that has been sold by Dallas may be the original one, Zendejas, and his move to Mexico.
That is, yes. Yeah. That's gone fantastically well. Yeah.
I mean, I'm totally doing this off the top of my head, and I'm sure somebody's going to send us a note going, "No, you idiot, you forgot so-and-so." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, duh." But nobody I can think of off the top of my head.
That they sold, no. I mean, that's really it.
Yeah.
I'm going back through the list, and I'm not seeing anybody that even is remotely. I mean, you could look at like the Funes Mori brothers, but they didn't sell them either.
No.
Neither was Shaq Moore sold. Emerson Hyman wasn't sold.
No.
So guys have done well, but they're Richard Sanchez carved out a pretty long career after being sold, but not necessarily a successful one. per se.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. Weird irony. So what else? Any other Huntsman Dumpsy stuff? I'm sorry, I keep sidetracking.
Sure. Well, he talked to me a little bit about the Edwin Cirio deal, and reiterated that like while they really liked Edwin, like Edwin turned down their offer, and so he was coming up free agency, and you really can't do that as a team. You don't want to have that happen. So, they got $200K for him up front, but Zanotta says that if he plays a minute for them this season, that Dallas gets another 300. So that basically is 500 for him if he plays at all, and then there's another 100K if he resigns. So that's that's a pretty good deal if he'll get in a game, and I imagine he will over the back end of the season. That would be crazy for them to trade 200K up front and then not get him even in a game.
Do you think?
Really weird.
Do you knowing that we knew that Cirio had turned down an offer?
Yeah.
Is the background on that he was actively hoping to go get a change of scenery, or he just didn't like the offer and was hoping he'd get a better one?
I think he probably wanted to kind of see what the market was going to determine. Look, I haven't asked Eben about it, so I'm kind of just operating from like what I know about him. I don't know that he was specifically saying I want out of Dallas, period.
Right. As
much as he kind of wanted to see what the options were, see what his chances were at various things, and not knowing, of course, what the offer was. He may have been like, "You're ridiculous." Entirely possible. Zanotta didn't tell me what they offered, just that they had, and he turned it down. So
pack of gum.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been probably at least what he's getting now, I would imagine. So, but probably like backup kind of money. Maybe at most like 300s or something, maybe. Mm-hmm. And maybe Evan feels like he can get a little more than that. Certainly these days the markets are kind of going up a little bit. He's a guy who maybe if Dallas doesn't want him to start, other teams can say, look, he started 50 games plus in MLS, like he can play at this level, so we know we can pay him and have him either reliable or something. So Again, I'm not trying to speak for Edwin, I don't know, but I just was left an impression that he kind of just wanted to see what was out there, and so understandably the Dallas did what they did, and Liam Frazier basically is the piece they went and got for, and that's another little factoid is that when they had a trade to get Frazier's rights, for MLS rights, so Zanotta said there were multiple teams that were interested in him, and so he got to pick, and he picked Dallas of the teams that were interested. So that's kind of nice to hear a player like being interested in playing here, and thinking that this was a good option, for him. So that's kind of cool. Next little bit was that Facundo Quignon is well along the process for a green card. So there's that.
Oh boy.
So. I don't.
Does that mean more Facundo Quignon down the road?
Yeah, it probably means it's more likely you would pick him up if he doesn't require that international spot. In a general tilt of the entire conversation, not specifically regarding Facundo, Zanotta did remind me that you can always renegotiate with people at any given time. You don't necessarily have to pick up options and take what's on the table.
Right.
So even though Facundo has an option, if you wanted to bring him back and get a green card, you might say, well, we have this other guy now, so if you want to come back, it's going to be for less or something. So that's speculation on my end, but interesting that he's wants to be here after he's getting a green card. That's actually really good for the club if he gets it. If they do want to keep him or not is a different question we'll have to have at the end of the season. All right, the next one was they don't have any concrete offers for Jesus yet. He said they never even talked to Cadiz at all. Never even had a conversation with him. They never called. He said he didn't know why all those stories were being floated out there. But they do have teams that are calling and asking what the price is. But no one has put down a concrete offer yet.
He didn't happen to mention what that price is by chance, did he?
Well, he and I talked a little bit about what that price might be, but I don't want to say what he said.
Can I guess, and you can tell me if I'm close?
You can, yeah. I'll just say that the numbers that we have talked about on our podcast are pretty close.
So
maybe a little less than I would have said,
so
but more than the offers that were out there.
$175 million off is what you're saying.
More than the Cadiz reported story, but less than maybe I had said. How's that go? Is that a good ballpark? Yeah.
Yes.
I don't want to pin them down when, it was just a conversation between the two of us.
Right. Hey, Buzz, does this podcast come out at 12? Does this podcast come out at 12?
Yeah.
It
might. It might
p.m.
this week. Yeah.
Okay, I just wonder if it was going to come out at 12
It
or
might.
more like 11.
Yeah.
Or
Who knows? Well,
1300.
what we did talk about was the idea that for them, always the add-ons and the percentages and the sell-ons are always going to be key.
Right.
So it's fluid, that number, based on what all they can get added on. That's the trick.
Do you have any sense as to what Jesus wants?
Only in the sense of like conversations I've had around him and like what I know about his mentality and stuff. And everyone always tells me that he actually really is very happy here in Dallas and that he likes FC Dallas. And
$2 million bucks a year. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure that's a big part of it. You can tell from social medias that he's got some good things in his life off the field happening here. That's all great. The trick is though, is that kid is ambitious. And
the stuff we're talking about, what we witness in games, kind of his, body language and frustration level and things like that makes you
can
wonder.
see it. The kid thinks he's talented. There's no question.
Well, he is.
But he is very talented. I've said before that I think right this second he's the best player this club's ever had. Now, is he going to hold that up? We'll see. There's lots of factors in that. The thing is that he is very competitive. So, like, if the team is not signing people that in his mind are going to help him win things, that will shorten his willingness to stay here. He does eventually want to go, but he wants to do some things here first. He's always talked about his dad and how he would like to leave here with as a bigger name and having done more things that his dad didn't do. Just sort of as a benchmark of like, I want to do better, So I think he probably feels like there's unfinished business, but at the same time, if there's enough money and the right team comes, he'll go. So we'll see on that. They have him through a fair good of time. I have that document here in front of me. They have him through, where did it go? There it is, 2025, and then an option for 2026 at a big number. So, he ain't going to be in a hurry. But if you stop signing people and other clubs are signing Messi and you're signing, Ansa from the third tier of the Israeli league, maybe that his feelings start to change. I wouldn't put it past him if he did start to feel differently about it.
Yeah. The Messi effect is wide-reaching, my friend Buzz.
Believe me, those are the questions that I wanted to ask Dan was, how do you respond? Do you feel like there's a challenge now? Is it like, how do the Hunts deal with this, who are notably not big spenders, But I didn't get a chance to get into those conversations because there was a line of people waiting to talk to him. So they promised me that I'll get to talk to him here coming up soon. So hopefully I'll get some of that stuff and maybe some stadium talk too, because that's important too.
Yeah, it was funny. So did they talk all about the new guy or new guys?
Not really. Everyone wanted to ask questions about the World Cup, and think these bigger, that's what I kind of felt like they were trying to set it up where everyone could talk to Yaramendi, and I was like, man, I don't know anyone wants to talk to that guy. I mean, listen, the resume is amazing, but nobody's heard of that player before, right? I mean, even unless you were a really deep follower of the Spanish league or really into Real Madrid, you no clue who this guy is.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen his name before and I've heard him referenced, but I don't know. I'm sure I've seen him play at some point, just through a Champions League game or something.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, oh, they signed him. It was funny. I was at our Sunday kick around. Garrett Melcher makes an appearance every once in a while, and Garrett was kind enough and smart enough to correct me when I butchered his name, and that's where so it looks like they've shortened his name for his shirt.
Yeah, that's a common thing for him based on some of my Googling, is that most everybody just calls him Iara. So,
right. So when I butchered it, Garrett said, no, it's Iara. And I was like, and he didn't add the Mendy to the end of it. And now I realize why, because I guess that's what they're just referring to him now. I want people to refer to him as Yada. So
yeah, I'm not quite so good. Gringo double L. The double L thing gets me. Like I know that I'm not doing it right, but Yara is about as close as I can get.
Yeah, it took me forever to get Victor Ulloa's last name correct.
So I'm still probably not right on that. Yeah.
All right.
Edwin, listening to Edwin say his name in Spanish style or in English style, depending on who he's talking to.
Yeah.
And he did it again, the LA introduction thing. He said Cerrillo again. I was like, oh, man, which one are you going to do?
Have you seen the guy play at all? Have you seen him or Frazier play at all?
I've seen Frazier. I've not seen.
Oh, that's right. Last week you saw Frazier.
I saw him last week. Yeah, the confluence of events prevented me this week from going to training. But
well, the Yara guy, I was shocked how skinny he looks.
He's fit. Yeah, he's
no. He looked, and I don't mean
Yeah.
skinny fit. I mean, I was just surprised how skinny. Period. Even for a fit soccer player,
Yeah.
at least from the photos I've seen. I haven't seen video of him or anything like that. But when they released the picture of him in his jersey, I was like, wow, that dude is skinny.
Yeah, he's wiry. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Is he tall?
No, he's short. No, I would say
that's
he's
promising.
about. Yeah, I would say he's about 5'8" and wiry.
That's good news. Okay.
Well, that's one more thing that Zanotta told me is that they actually look at him more as an 8 than a 6.
Oh, weird.
He was playing
Okay.
as an 8 in Spain most recently and not 6. So that lends us to a deeper conversation about potentially more of a double pivoty kind of look with Facundo and him, and somebody else in front of him.
Well, if the Cat can pass as half as well as the Spanish women's national team, we're in business, I think.
Well,
that would be a good thing.
Yeah, that's what Nico said. What they liked about him was his passing. He's a very good passer, getting forward in the box, penetrating, setting up. So that's exciting. That's good.
Okay, and then that will lead us into. I want to talk a little bit about something else that happened today, but since we're already talking about this, let's talk about Austin on Saturday and
Sure.
what you're thinking. And I mean, is Yada going to play in that game? Do you think?
Yeah, I would think so.
Start?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
This coach is big on team concept and integration, and in particular, while this guy probably is way ahead of the concepts that they're doing, there's he
won't show up like Messi and just start bossing to stuff.
He might, but maybe not game one. He hasn't played since June. So there's a 2 or 3 month layoff there. So it's like he's coming into spring camp in a way, right? So he'll need a week or two to get up to speed. But I would expect him to be on the bench, absolutely, and I would expect him to get in. Actually, this is a week where they have 3 games in a week. They have Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday. So. They're going to need a little rotation. And later
played in a month. Everybody should be just fine.
Well, yes, but you have at the end of September, you have a really heavy stretch where you have like 3 or 4 straight weeks of Wednesday games.
Oh, wow.
So they're kind of going to need to protect the squad over the back half of the season. So of these 3 games, would I expect him to start a game in there or maybe 2 even? Yeah, absolutely. I would expect that. 1 for sure, I would bet. But maybe not the first one. Maybe come off the bench for the first one. So, I asked Coach about it. We did a coach conference call that day. I said, how's his fitness? And he said, maybe not 100% game sharp, but the guy's super pro and he really keeps himself in good shape. So it's just a question of getting, his feet underneath him and he'll be fine.
So I forgot to ask you this. When you had an opportunity and you were standing in front of Zanotta, did you sternly poke him in the chest with your index finger and go, where are all the other damn signings? Why aren't you out signing a trio of Barcelona legends?
Well, the first thing I did was I did the Miazga thing, like you're real short and I'm real tall. I did that. I'm just kidding. I didn't. But it is like talking to someone. He's quite a bit shorter than me. I sort of asked about that in general.
You're 6'3", 215, Buzz.
I'm not 6'3". I'm only 6 feet tall, but I'm still much taller than him. I did sort of ask Dan Hunt about that in sort of the general conversation that was, the lunch kind of conversation. And Dan basically said what I said. I'm not quoting the man, but basically what we talked about on this podcast is that Miami had this perfect storm of they got in trouble and they had to sacrifice all those players or whatever. So they had all these open slots. And when those probations came off at the same time that they had been lining up Messi for 1.5 years or 3 years or whatever it was. So they basically stockpiled all this stuff. They had all these movements available. They jettisoned a bunch of people to create spots. They had a bunch of cap available. They had a bunch of TAM and GAM available, and they were able to do that stuff. Dallas doesn't have all that stuff. I've been talking about it all year that Dallas was kind of out of TAM and GAM, that we were going to have to wait a little bit, and they were out of it. They had to trade for a couple of international spots as it was. But I think coming up this year, we've talked about this too. There could be as many as like 6 or 7 guys who would either be out of contract or not anymore because that one's gone. But like 6 more guys that have options that you could decline. So they could open up and this is just me looking at the paper. They can open up a boatload of money and maybe a DP spot, maybe a high TAM spot or two. So this winter, they're going to have the capability to do some things. They just didn't have it this summer, you know. And I've had multiple conversations with Dan Hunt about how stupidly overcomplicated the rules are in this league, and how it makes it hard for people to understand it. The casual fan, the average fan, struggles to get all this minutia. And they said, "Damn, even the teams struggle with it sometimes." You know, there's just so much. So, you know, they just weren't in a position to do these kinds of things. You know, they did what little they felt they could do. I think that's not me speaking for them, of course, but you know, there's a couple solid pieces here, and I honestly think if you go back to this talk when they first came in with Zanotta and Nico, they talked all about this process idea because they lined up a couple of moves that first season. You know, your Leggett, your Areola, getting a keeper, you know, some stabilizing moves, and then that was kind of be it for a bit until they got more assets to be able to do more things and cleared off some caps that they didn't want. So that's still where they are, and I think you'll see more activity this winter.
I was talking with a friend of mine today that's a fan of the sport, and he was saying that he has a friend that's from Cincinnati who is really into the MLS team, and as a fan, he's livid about the Messi signing.
Really?
Yeah, and my friend was curious. He's like, why would he be mad? And I said, well, the reason why there's a subset of MLS fans that are mad about the Messi signing is because they feel like Miami was given some sort of access that no other team was made available to them, which was, you know, Adidas and Apple throwing in a whole bunch of money, because that's not going to happen for any other club.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to, hey, you only get a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to sign the best player of all time, and how transformative it could be. But the fact that other clubs or other fans of other, and in Cincinnati's case, the reason why I think those fans are pissed is because they're having they may win MLS Cup this season.
Yeah, they were
until now.
Yeah,
they may have won. Well, we don't know what's going to happen at this point. I mean, I'm with you, and I are savvy enough to know that this isn't going to last forever. The thing that's happening with Messi.
Yeah,
and it certainly is going to change when he starts playing regular MLS League games, but if you can understand a fan of a club that was churning along in this season at the top of the table all along, only to suddenly have another team at the bottom of the table get the best player in the world added to it, and they go on a run, you could get nervous about it and at least pitch a fit. So I kind of understand that.
Well, they have 18 points on 22 games, and they're 14 points out, so they would have to, you know, go on a pretty ridiculous tear to do it, but I suppose it could happen.
Well, I mean, I've watched them go to Philly and make Philly look stupid, and I've seen them fight back from a 2-0, deficit in Cincy in an amazing atmosphere. By the way, man, I love the Cincinnati fan base. I wish all of the upstart all of the new recent MLS edition fan bases were as, in my opinion, legit as the Cincinnati group is. My observation is those guys are really cool. And so I don't know what happens from here on out, Bal. I think I know what happens. I think it dies off, but I'm not sure.
It's going to be, well, I mean, who knows? Some of their other people have stepped up, certainly. But, you know, what I would say to the average fan that's upset about it is that, as you mentioned, this is Beckham. This is a transcendent player, you know, and yes, the mechanics of roster moves, Miami has executed correctly. The trick, as you say, is the extra stuff. And this is where single entity comes into play, where the commissioner and the owners have agreed together collectively that this move, and everyone else is paying for this move too, is for the benefit of everybody. You know, this is where this is, in a way, it's anti-capitalistic in the sense that, like, they're colluding, if you will, honestly, but not legally, because it's a single entity structure. You know, that ship was legally defined and determined in the second season of the league, so that's not going to ever change. And the chances that it's going to be another player again like this, man, I don't know if there's going to be a third one. That would be hard. Man, that'd be hard to say after Beckham and after Messi. But you might see something crazy happen again in this league in terms of, like, maybe there's other teams that could use some help like this, or maybe there's some stadium situations. You never know what they're going to come up with. And Don Garber has the power to occasionally do things for the good of the league. He's allowed in this league to do things and change the rules and make exceptions. And, if you don't like it, all you have to do is not be a fan of the league. I know that's a harsh thing to say, but that it is, sometimes things are the way they are, and you just have to deal with them. And this is one of those cases where, as much as it annoys me as a Dallas fan that the owners of this team don't go out and get a Messi, I understand how good it is for the entire league, because I'm in TV and media. I know the numbers that they're doing with this Apple TV thing post Messi are just absolutely insane. I know the numbers the teams are doing with tickets, or even like the renewal of or new season tickets they're getting from people that just came to the Messi game and are like, we hear word of mouth. I'm sure you did. I'm sure Dan did. Of like the things that are happening in the ticket office, just because, man, the Messi thing was so awesome. I'm getting tickets next year. Things like that. And they even are clear with people that we're probably not getting Messi that next year. Because we had him 2 years in a row.
Right.
We had Miami 2 years in a row. We're probably not getting him next year. But this is one of those cases where this deal is so good for the league. I understand why a Cincinnati fan might be mad, but MLS is weird, man. I think it's awesome.
I was listening to a podcast, and the former Real Salt Lake Man City QPR player, Nedum Onana, I always forget how to pronounce Nedum's last name, Anoa, was on this podcast, and he was talking about, he found out as he played in the league that all players have to go through some sort of approval process at the league level with all the owners, and there are owners that can say, no, I don't want that guy in the league.
You're talking about MLS?
Huh? Yes.
Yeah.
And then and it was kind of like players, if a group of owners don't want a specific player in the league, they can all reject it, and that team's screwed, and that player can't come play in the league. And I guess I kind of knew that, but I had never heard it stated that way.
Yeah.
I knew there was an approval process, but it never dawned on me that if, Wayne Rooney wanted to come play in MLS and 3 of the owners said, no, we don't want Wayne Rooney in MLS, he couldn't play.
They could, yeah. The contract's all with the league office. I'll give you an FC Dallas example. This is an obscure example, but there was Lee Nguyen tried to come here twice to FC Dallas. And one of the times FC Dallas agreed to a contract with him, and they sent it to the league, and Lee kicked it back and said no. And they tore it up and said no.
But we don't know why the league said no.
Oh, I do know why. This was in the era when if you skipped the draft and went straight to Europe and then quote unquote didn't make it and wanted to come back,
it was like punishment.
Yeah, they would only give you like a tiny deal, because he wanted to come back, and I'm going to pull some numbers out of air, but it was something like he wanted to come back from his first stint over there, and Dallas agreed to a deal with him for like $100K, which back then was a good chunk of money. And the league was like, no, $20K or nothing. And Lee was like, no, I'll go back to Vietnam or whatever he did. So, and that was the first time they tried to sign him. So, it's just an example of the league at that time had this pretty strict policy of, if you're going to bypass us, we're not going to reward you for failing somewhere else, was their logic behind it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it happened with Alex Yee. Remember, Alex Yee came back here. He was on a pretty cheap deal when he came, and Dallas got him in the weighted lottery, I think. He got a pretty low deal because he didn't pan out at PSV or wherever he was at,
Well, Buzz, I'm sorry. I'm doing a bad job of hosting this. I'm driving us all over the road because we never really finished talking about expected lineups for Austin or St. Louis on Wednesday. This is all my fault, so I apologize.
Right. So there's 3 games in a week, so you might see a little bit of rotation in there. But remember that this coach likes to manage minutes with subs because he has 5 subs at his disposal, so he likes to use those by, rather than having Facundo go 90, he'll have him go 60 or 70 and bring in Liam. So and now it would have been Evan before, but now it's going to be Liam. And we saw that one game when they didn't have a 6, how much of a problem that was. So really Liam is the new backup 6, if you will. He can play some center back too, which is nice since Martinez is so fragile these days. But you can pretty much pick the lineup easily. Paz, obviously, Farfan, obviously. Of the 3 games, do you start Junko once, who's done really well? You probably see Martinez get one of those 3 games at center back. Otherwise, it'll be maybe even 2, and you'll see Nkosi and Tafari and Ibiaga be in there. Right back, I'm going to say at home you'll see Giovanni, and then on the road you'll see Tuamasi. And then Facundo should probably start 2 of the 3, probably all 3 actually, with Liam just subbing in because they're not going to want to risk that position unless they decide to put Yara at the 6. But I'm telling you that they just were telling me that Yara's more of an 8. So look for him to spell Leggett. I mean, like his time here, if it works out, he may take minutes from Leggett and from Paxton as much as anything. Coach has been pretty adamant that the Velasco midfield thing is going to continue. And when they go that shape, it's not a strict double pivot, but the other 8 plays a little deeper and Velasco plays a little higher. And that leaves you up front. Obviously, Jesus will go all 3 games, and I would expect Bernie and O'Brien to get the bulk of the minutes. There's been some times where Ansa has looked pretty good, but he hasn't looked so good that like it's a no-brainer that you put him in over O'Brien, because like the last game he played, Ansa was pretty bad, which is weird. So like I had
the Miami game.
Yeah, just when I said he should start, you got to put a stinker up. So Ariel will be pushing for more minutes as he gets healthier and healthier. Both he and Paxton, when I saw them last week, looked much, much better in training, which is really good because they both looked like old men when I saw them the week before. So that's really exciting that both those guys could actually be useful, probably coming off the bench. But the goal is to get Ariola back in the lineup, hopefully back in the lineup over O'Brien, and keep Bernie in there because Bernie's earning his time big time. So you might see a lot of Bernie and hopefully Paul as we go forward. That'd be really cool. So
yeah, it does feel like that the plague of injuries that have, this team has been suffering all season really is starting to clear up. And we're actually at a point where we can have actual debates about who should be starting and who shouldn't be starting, which is kind of fun for the first time.
Yeah, everybody's healthy. And Coach said on the call today, he said it's going to be really difficult to get in the first team to start. It's going to be difficult to get into the bench because we're back to, just the 9 players. So there's going to be, 6 or 7 dudes left out now again, and guys will be down with North Texas. For example, if everybody missed it, Jose Mulato was moved down to North Texas permanently, basically, because they needed his international spot. So pending somebody getting hurt, he won't be back this year to the first team because they gave his international spot to Iara.
All right. So let's see. Austin, the Beef and Broccoli Bowl is Saturday, and then Wednesday at St. Louis.
Well, the one thing to consider is that Austin is here, right, and St. Louis is on the road. St. Louis is much better. They want to play. They play very direct. They don't possess the ball. They come out hard and they go long, try to play to their big guy. Austin wants to try and play with you. So, Austin will play into the way that Dallas wants to play. Austin will want to have the ball a little bit, and Dallas will counterattack them. St. Louis is interesting. Dallas beat St. Louis a little while ago, so they're going to be chomping the bit to get them back. That was the split game, remember, where they played half and half.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So they actually have had some success against both those teams. So I would bet you that the Dallas locker room feels like they can win both those games, even though one of them's on the road. I know St. Louis is really good, but, there's a team that Dallas did well against, and so they're going to be mad at Dallas. So how you pick personnel may be dependent on how you think the other teams are going to play. They both have very distinct styles. So, Austin maybe is not that great right now. So maybe you might rotate a little bit for this first game, and try and be more stalwart on the road and play that deeper mid to low block that they like to do and counter on the road against St. Louis. Because St. Louis doesn't necessarily want the ball, but they might be a little confused by the fact that you don't want it either. And then they have to have it all of a sudden. So it'll be interesting.
As much fun as we're having giggling at how bad Austin can be at times, despite the fact they're ahead of us in the standings, is it also equally disturbing that Houston appears to be so improved in the same way we all, as much as we're enjoying the downturn in Austin's form, are we all like a little sick to our stomachs at the uptick in Houston's performance, and now that they've qualified for the U.S. Open Cup final as well?
I'm surprised they got as good as they did that fast. I mean, Coco Carrasquilla is a baller. That dude can play. And Hector Herrera must have been sandbagging last year because he was awful last year, and he looks great this year. So they got much better real quick. But if you look at the Western Conference, second place LAFC down to Dallas in 10th is 10 points. And so Dallas to Minnesota, Vancouver, Austin, Houston, all within 2 points of each other.
Yeah.
So those teams are all even. San Jose is 3 points ahead of that. Seattle 1 point ahead of that. Wow.
St.
Salt
Louis?
Lake. Salt Lake. I kept trying to say Salt Lake, and my brain kept saying St. Louis. Another point ahead of that. Those teams are all the same, right? It's basically 2, well, maybe not 2, that's LAFC. 3 through 10 are almost all the same. If Dallas doesn't have 18 billion injuries all at central midfield, are they 2 points behind those teams? No. They're probably 4 points ahead of them. But whatever, that's my point, is they're all the same. So, when you have Austin at home, which is a team that was in rough form earlier this year, you have to feel like that's a team that you should definitely be winning that game on your home court,
I'm sitting here looking at the standings, and I'm a little surprised that St. Louis has lost 3 times at home this season.
Yeah, that's what I mean by like you might feel like that you actually have a shot there. But on the other hand, Dallas is only 2-6-4 away, but they are able to grind out ties, how they keep those games tight, and they have had a little success against St. Louis. So, I don't hate the chances at St. Louis. I really think that, with Austin only having 3 road wins, you better win that game against Austin here, this weekend. That's pretty much a must. You got 10 games left, but it's almost a must win in a sense, because that's a team you're competing with for a spot. That's a 6-point game. St. Louis is way out. That's not a 6-point game. I mean, it is, but it's not. Austin is.
Well, we all kind of predicted at the beginning of the season that this was a team that probably was going to battle for a playoff spot, one way or the other. I can't remember where we all predicted them to finish.
I think I said 5.
Yeah, and that's and it feels like that's probably going to come down to how it's going to play itself out. But at least it feels like the team is more healthy. Players are back, and we've got a few new additions to goof around with. It'd be nice if somebody could start scoring some goals.
So, other than Jesus, yeah.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. From
Well,
your mouth to God's ears.
Look at the Leagues Cup play. Other than losing to Miami, you have to be pretty confident about the way they were playing. The Velasco in the midfield thing was working. People were getting more opportunities. Jets game came up, maybe because Velasco was in there, but maybe also because he was kind of waking up. If Ariel can get back to form, there's lots of things to feel positive about. I'm expecting this team to climb back up the standings now that they got everybody healthy.
And I'm trusting that Mr. Paz is in tip-top shape because his supermodel girlfriend's back in town and been hanging out.
Yeah.
And so he should be super happy and not forlorn or distracted or anything like that. So
love it.
Yes. All right. Let's see. So Austin on Saturday, St. Louis on Wednesday. And who is it they play the following Saturday? I forgot. I closed that.
I want to say Atlanta.
Yeah, okay. We'll go with that. Atlanta. Yep. Before we get into the question and answers and finish that up, today I wanted to discuss with you and get your reaction. The video posted by the chairman of San Diego Loyal, I never knew how they pronounced it.
Loyal.
Which was just as soul-crushing and heartbreaking.
Oh, man.
Now, for those who haven't seen it, they announced today that San Diego Loyal is closing up shop after this current USL season. And as you know, part of this is tied to some degree, I don't think we know the full story, to the fact that there's another club coming to town that's going to play in MLS. And he, in a very brave and heartfelt way, just kind of got on camera sitting in the stands at whatever stadium they play in and just kind of told his side of the story and said, look, we just can't do this anymore and we're not going to be able to do this, so we're closing up shop, and thanked everybody. He didn't blame anybody. He didn't crap on anybody. He didn't, throw stones at any other entity or anything like that. He just said, we can't do this anymore. And it was heartbreaking to watch. But the thing that really stuck out to me about it, Buzz, is that it felt like it was a prime example of like a business version of the downside of promotion relegation.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, literally. Well, first, huge respects to that guy for holding it together for the 3 minutes of that video when he clearly had his heart ripped out. He was on the verge of losing it, and he didn't. And I have so much respect for that, doing that on camera. I mean, how many teams put out a statement, right? And he got out there in front of the fans, not literally, but metaphorically in front of the fans, and did a video. So huge props for that.
Off the cuff, too. And he wasn't reading it off a prompt or anything. He was just speaking from the heart.
Yeah, baller move. So you're right in the sense that we are witnessing promotion and relegation. This is what happens is MLS basically cherry picks the markets that they think are doing really well on an economic reason. It's capitalism, promotion, relegation. It's not over what you did on the field. It's what you're doing in terms of money, or that they think you have money. And in particular in this case is something that's actually really important to talk about because it applies here in Dallas, and that's revenue control. That's what everyone who's in these situations when they're talking about trying to put a team together, revenue control through your stadium is everything. And if you don't have your own stadium, or if you don't have a good deal in your own stadium, it will just crush your franchise in a heartbeat. This is why North Texas Soccer Club plays at the stadium they do, because they have a deal there that allows them economic control to a certain extent. It makes the thing work. This is why
because
you
it's
don't
cheap.
see. Yeah. Well, I don't know for sure, but they wouldn't do it if it wasn't economically feasible. The Hunts, we're talking about the Hunts, man.
Right,
They don't
yeah.
do stuff if it's not economically feasible. The thing with the Bold is 100% contingent on Donnie and his people getting a stadium where they will have revenue control. They're not going to go play at TCU. I mean, they might temporarily for 5 minutes, but this is the problem, even at like the MPSL level, when you talk like, okay, why don't the Vaqueros jump up to do this or that or whatever? Because they don't have a stadium.
Right. Yeah.
If you can't bring the money into your organization to make it flow and work, you can't do it. It's the hard part about sports, professional sports in the United States, is revenue control. And so if you're waiting for any team to come into this market, whether it be the new women's pro team, whether it be the new USL team, which may or may not still happen, or any other team, if they can't work out a stadium to make the finances work in their favor, they won't work. Just what the Loyal just ran into. It has to be there.
Yes.
It won't work.
Yeah. And the maddening part about this is I made the mistake of looking at the comments, and everybody wants to blame MLS for this. Well, MLS just came and barged in and took over the market. Well, look, and if we had promotion relegation, they'd have to earn their way into it. Well, if a bigger, badder bankrolled team comes into town in your same city and decides to roll a team out, what do you think's going to happen? Like, I mean, the reality is, as harsh as this seems, this guy that owns the Loyal, and by the way, just for full transparency, a personal friend and teammate of mine's son plays on that team. He's a starter for L'Oreal. So this is like, I know how this is going to affect people personally, but this team has had 4 years to build an audience and create a business opportunity for themselves that they just weren't successful enough to do. And that's why they're having to bail on it after all this amount of time. The fact that MLS is coming into it just has made it more complicated for them.
Yeah.
And what I get frustrated when we get stuck in this stupid argument about promotion relegation is the reality of what happens when teams get relegated. Because in the United States, imagine a team that has spent all this time, money, and effort getting a stadium, working a stadium deal with all these seats, gets kicked out of the top level league. There is not a world that exists where that stadium is going to be able to be financially sustainable in a second or third division or whatever it is. And that's the problem. That's why it doesn't work here in the United States.
Yeah, I remember reading an article talking about Everton this last year when they were on the verge of getting relegated. It was doing a dive into the numbers of their new stadium and what they have on the line, and that if they had been relegated, the team probably would have gone under, because they put all this money on the line with the new venue, the hundreds of millions of dollars, and if they lost out on the Premier League, it would have destroyed the whole model and they would have gone down.
Yeah,
and I'm like, that's a 100-year-old club. This is a thing I did the other day. I did a burn about this the other day, in a sense. This idea that you have to deal with the world as it is in terms of the sporting world. It's great to have standings that you believe in and things that you believe in. You can believe all you want that promotion and relegation is the way to go. But you have to be clear-eyed about things and look at the way the United States functions and look at the way our soccer system has functioned. We have not had a league for 100 years. We've only had one for 27. There's no pyramid. MLS does not sit on top of a pyramid of stability. All those other leagues hang off of the high-flying, if you will, Major League Soccer. It all dangles off of the top, off of the pinnacle. It's a reverse of a pyramid. Now, that's a funny expression of way to say it, but that's true. It's like none of this would be happening in the United States if it weren't for Major League Soccer. And you have to recognize that owners here in MLS They have all the purse strings tied up. They have all the system tied up. They control it all. You have to recognize the system is the way it is and that you're not going to be able to change it. People are paying $500 million or more for a team in a stadium. You're not going to be able to change it.
Yeah.
So just try to burn it to the ground if you want, but it's like you're just banging your head against the wall. Just try to deal with it as it is.
You know what? Clearly, and this is a great example, is this guy, young guy, clearly ambitious, from San Diego, put this together with all the best intentions and had a cool brand, had a cool look, had a good connection with the community, and he couldn't make it work.
Yep.
And so anyway, I could prattle on about this all day.
Yeah,
I felt I felt terrible about watching that video. I feel bad for their fans. But again, it just doesn't work the same way in this country as it does other places. And
here's all you need to know about Pro Rel. USL the other day announced that they were going to talk about it, right? Nope.
Nope.
They pushed that off.
Right.
How much you want to bet they never do it?
Well, because there are too many teams at those levels that have worked stadium deals that they can't afford to get relegated in. Yeah. That's the deal.
Exactly.
We had the two guys that live in Dallas on the kick around that own one of them owns Leyton Orient, the other guy owns Woking, and they talked about this. We had a whole conversation about this, and if people haven't heard it, go back and listen to the recording on our podcast feed. It's a fascinating conversation, and they're like, they love promotion relegation in England, but they both say, I'd love to own a team in MLS, but promotion relegation will never work in this country, just strictly from a business standpoint.
I love that the same people that want the Hunts to build a 70,000 seat stadium downtown and spend $500 million doing it are the same ones that want promotion and relegation to have that team get dumped out of the league.
Sure.
And then be stuck with this.
Yeah, it's maddening.
Yeah.
All right. Again, I've sidetracked us terribly, Buzz. But my heart goes out to the San Diego people, and hope my boy Cam gets a new fun place to play soon. All right, let's move on into the second half, part 2 of question and answers. We didn't get to do all of them last week because we had so many good questions. We wanted to make sure we answered them correctly. So we'll run through these. Buzz has collected them together, so I'll be a little smarter about this. Let's see here. We'll start with Fritz. And Fritz is asking, is FCD going to be able to clean up the right back position this offseason? Seems like carrying 4 on the roster is bad management, but it's not like any of them are really pushing to be the cornerstone by next year.
Yeah, they'll have the flexibility to do a lot at that position, with the one caveat being that Giovanni Jesus is under a contract through 2026. With a bonus 2027. He has the longest contract along with Paxton and the whole team. So there's a big investment there. That guy will be here and he will be playing. You don't do that kind of deal and then not do that. So Tuamasi at 26 years old is what he is. He's basically going to be coming into the peak of his career. He's not going to get significantly better than he is now. So they have him for another year as well. So you could move him or trade him or do something like that, but I don't really know that they'll want to. The question comes down to Colin Smith really is the question. Like, do you think he's better than Tuamasi, or do you – so because he has an option you don't have to pick up. The bottom line is, yes, they have the capability to clean that position up. It would not shock me to see them not do it, though. There's a reason to keep every guy among those 4, honestly. Because Endele has shown a little bit. He's got another option year but really using mostly in North Texas. They got a homegrown in Smith. They put a lot of money in him. They're not going to want to dump him necessarily. And now he's finally shown a little bit. We've seen him come back and be okay. So, I would not expect a clean house at that position.
Fritz actually sent us a quad pack of questions. His second one is over and under 0.5. I don't understand. Over and under on how many 2005s are signed to homegrown contracts.
Fritz is a big academy guy. So
okay.
He's a big fan of that. So over under 0.5. So I'm going to go over. Now, Peter, a lot of these names are not going to be.
He's setting the over and under at 0.5. Now I understand what he.
Yeah, he's asking whether I'm going over or under. I'm going to go over, but maybe not by a lot.
Well, it could be 1.
Yeah, 1 is going to be over. Well, because number 1 is Anthony Ramirez. I've been talking about this kid for years. He doesn't graduate high school until next summer, so there's no real rush on him. So he's class of 2005. You also have some guys like who I'm drawing a blank here. Diego Hernandez, who's now at Furman. I think he gets into the league eventually. You have a couple of guys going to college other than him that are potentially getting there. It's not, the verdict is not out yet on 2005. So there's still a guy or two that could get it done. Dylan Lacey, who North Texas just signed. Mason Grimm's going to go to Solar. So, I can go 4 or 5 guys deep that still have a shot. Number one of which, Anthony Ramirez, is very high on that list. And so there easily, for me, will be one more at least.
Okay. And then he has a long question essentially asking if what your biggest miss in evaluating young players has been in the club.
Yeah, my biggest miss, I think he's asked for both positive and negative. My biggest negative miss, I think if I'm answering this question correctly, is going to be Ruben Luna. I really thought Ruben Luna had everything it took. That was actually a really big learning curve for me. And no offense to Ruben, he's a good dude. Because he had so many tools that were phenomenal. Work rate, mentality. He scored absolute boatloads of goals in the academy. Just ridiculous numbers. He was like player of the year twice. Huge prospect coming out. And he just couldn't get it done in Major League Soccer. There was just
it's a long time dates
ago.
Back to what, 11 or 12?
Well, he and Victor and Moises Hernandez were like among the first 4 guys signed ever.
Yeah.
But he had all the tools except he was one tick too slow. He couldn't separate and get a shot off enough, and that cost him at that level. And it's a really good lesson because you can have a guy that has all kinds of great, amazing things. And if he has one tiny little deficiency in the wrong area, it can make all the rest of it not matter, particularly at certain positions. So that was a big learning curve for me on him. And the biggest miss I guess I had in a positive way, actually, is from that same group of guys, is Victor Ulloa. I had no chance at all. I thought that guy was going to make it. I did not see a 15-year MLS career coming for that dude. What a prize he turns out to be.
Man, watching him step on the field the other night with Messi when he got to sub in that game, that just sent chills down my spine. I'm still trying to book an interview with him. It's been because they keep playing in these games. Trying to get an interview with him for the kick around is still in the works. So hopefully we'll get that done soon.
Yeah, he's a guy who I looked at and I said, I hardly see anything. But when all the pieces that he did have, the whole sum was more than all that. And a lot of that is heart and mind. In certain positions like 6, perhaps that can be the case. So I thought nothing of that guy, and he's been the best of that 3, arguably.
And Fritz really hits hard with this question, Buzz. He's putting the screws to you here. Has Zanotta done enough to keep his job?
Yes, for the Hunts, yes, he has. Because the Hunts were struggling with revenue for this organization for years. You and I both know that since they moved to Frisco, there was probably only maybe 1 or 2 seasons where they broke even. Most of them, they lost money. Obviously we haven't seen the books, but we talked to people. And he's managed to, partially through the success of the academy, turn over players for profits, and he's finding these nuggets that have potential to be turned over for profit. So he hasn't won anything. And I think he needs to be better with managing the cap, but in the way that matters most to the Hunts, revenue and the survival of their franchise, he's been good. So I think he's going to keep his job pretty much as long as he wants it.
Interesting. All right, next up, Joseph writes just a single question, which is, if Dallas wants to continue to be the leaders in youth development in the U.S., what steps do they need to take?
Well, number one, they need to repair themselves and their reputation in this market. They came in scorched earth here, and through perhaps not their direct fault, maybe more of like a naivete about it. They, and maybe not even their fault. They go out and get the best players, and they go and take coaches away from other teams, unsurprisingly. So lots of people in this market hate FC Dallas quite strenuously. It is a scorched earth. There are
people
teams
who would buy season tickets, maybe even.
Organizations that we know of that have banned players from going to games. Organizations we know of that actively seek to keep players away from FC Dallas, players that would be of value to FC Dallas. And I could name 4 or 5 different examples of that, but that's not what the point. That's not the point. So number one, you got to repair that. And the simplest way that I can think of to go a long way to do that is to reward those teams with compensation when you take their players and publicity when you sign a kid out of your academy that came from one of those teams. Is build the community together, number one. So the second thing is that they need to refresh their coaching tree a little bit. They've had a lot of guys that have been hired away without a whole lot coming in. That just needs a little bit of work from here and there. They also need to scout more domestically, not just their own, not just like tryout players, but like actively go out and look at your own clubs, even both around here in the market. Like Brian Reynolds came from Fort Worth, Pepe came from El Paso, Zendejas came from El Paso. They have like 7 or 8 clubs and organizations in other countries. Get out there and scout those. How come we've never seen a player from any of these other clubs they have in other parts of the world? There's like 6 or 7 of them. Mm-hmm. There's a club in Florida that's an FC Dallas organization. How come we only see El Paso? If El Paso's doing something great that's getting these players, awesome. Maybe we need to figure out how to get that, whatever it is they're doing, to these other organizations, or maybe you're just not scouting them well enough. So, they need to just get out there more, and it's easy for me to spend somebody else's money, but that's the answer. They need to get out and scout more and get out and find some guys, because that's the difference. You have to find, it's always about the players. You can help everybody get better, sure, but you don't generate Pepe because you coached Pepe up. You just found Pepe, right? So it's the same with all players all the time. You got to go out and find them. That's all. So repair your market so that the clubs are helping you and not fighting against you. Refresh your coaching a little bit and go out and scout more.
Yes. I've long thought that Dallas would do themselves, the Hunts would do themselves a massive favor if they would act like a leader in the youth soccer scene instead of the town bully.
Don't be the enemy. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So RT News 7170 wrote a very long question. I'm going to paraphrase, Buzz.
Sure.
Essentially, what they are asking is for if there's an easy way to try to explain the rat's nest of MLS roster and salary rules that he, or they, I should say, hear people complain about all the time. And I'm not sure there is an easy way to do that. That's like a podcast unto itself.
There's not, yeah. I mean, it's not even just the mechanics. It's like the way the salary cap works. They don't explain it really well. And like the numbers that the MLSPA puts out aren't the cap numbers. Those are not what the cap is. The cap's different than those numbers, because the cap include things like your transfer fees. It includes things
amortized
like amortized or not. You could go either way. Things like bonuses, they roll them over. So like if you get a scoring bonus one year, they automatically add it the next year, so your cap can go up without your salary going up. Like weird crap like that. So like there's this incredible opaqueness to MLS, and that's the bottom line. Is that you can look at any other major sports in the United States, and there are guys that are capologists that can tell you every single contract on the team, how long they last, how it fits, all the slots and stuff. But they're way more simplified than the MLS one is. The MLS one is designed the way it is, and it's a lot of it's Clark Hunt's fault to hold down salaries, because the business model was everything for this league, because soccer has never worked here before. And it was all of these guys, these owners remember the failure of the North American Soccer League. And so they've overcomplicated it so that most of the time, these guys that own Miami can't become the Cosmos and go spend $500 million on players and destroy the league. So that's why it exists. I agree it's dumb. I agree it needs to be simplified, and it's probably time to start simplifying it some. But they also need to keep a lot of it still. For sure, the cap,
Yeah, I would tell this person that if you know the old adage about how lying just leads to other lies, the start of Major League Soccer and the idea of single entity and the initial set of dating back to 96 around roster and salary rules created a reality that the only way they could grow the league was by adding even more complicated and oddly twisted rules. And it just seems it's like a weed that has just grown and grown and grown and gotten more tangled and more, it's like a knot you can't untie at this point. And it's, I mean, I couldn't imagine being a new fan coming into this league and trying to understand all of this. And you and I only understand it just because of experience over the course of 30 years of watching this league and just kind of learning it through osmosis.
Yeah, and every year the rules are different, and every year I have to ask people to clarify stuff. I mean,
Right,
this is just ridiculous. I mean, the thing to understand about it, and this is what's important, is that the whole thing exists to keep spending down, and yet there are owners that want to do things differently from each other. Some of them want to go get Beckham, so they have rules for that. Some of them want to go get Fabian Castillo and then sell that guy 3 years later, right?
And there's rules for that.
Rules for that. So every time they give somebody a rule to make it tweak it the way they want to do it, they got to give the other group a rule to tweak it the way they do it, which is why you get things like young DPs to push people to have younger players and not older players, and why you have U22 initiatives again to push investment, spend money to make money. You know, it's all
it's the theory around the designated player to begin with.
Yeah,
it was dating back to when owners wanted to go get a player that was in no way, shape, or form ever going to fit underneath the salary cap, which way back then was what was the original salary cap? $1.2 million or something?
Yeah.
And so somebody wanted to go get, can't even think of the player off the top of my head at this time.
Beckham.
No, even before. Well, I thought it was Beckham the original.
No, he was the first DP. Yeah, they invented that rule for him.
Right. Okay. So so just trying to figure that out. That construction of that is the way that happens. So it's a mess to whoever who asked the question, and we'd all love it if they just figure out a way to make it far more transparent and easy to follow. Because I do think it's the one real big flaw in the entire league is how complicated and unexplainable it can be at times.
I think over time it'll get more transparent because the MLSPA pushes for that and fans push for it. You remember, Peter, in the beginning of the league, there was no cap, and all the contracts were the league, and we had no idea about any of them. You remember all those?
Well, there was a cap. We just didn't know what it was. It was all kind of internally kept.
Sure, yeah, but there was no stated cap. There was budgets. Like Mateos was getting a $10,000 a month apartment in New York and driving a Ferrari, and guys down here were making like $50K. If they were the rich guy, the poor guy was getting 12. I talked to Ed Puskarish about this just the other day. Guys that were making a living prior to MLS, almost all of them played indoor and then outdoor. They split the year, and they got like a double salary. And MLS came along and said to those guys, hey, here's $30K. And those guys are like, dude, I'm making $80K playing indoor-outdoor. Why would I take the $30K to MLS?
Yeah.
And some guys saw the opportunities and jumped. Other guys did not. So it's always been all over the map, and it actually is getting better. And I think over time, it'll continue to improve with transparency and simplification because it is what is good for the game. In the long run, it'll be better to be more free.
All right, Mark Blackwood is up next, and he has a very long question that ends with, am I being too glass half full, which all leads to a series of questions around people's health situation. He leads it off with, is it time to press the panic button on Paxton? Seba is only now beginning to look decent. Paul's not doing much. So talking about people being injury prone, etc. Buzz.
Yeah, well, Paxton is obviously a concern. I think at this point we're just going to have to accept that he's going to be an injury-prone player and just be missing quite frequently. You just have to decide whether that's worth it or not, and the team will have to decide whether it's worth it or not because he's never been able to put together. I mean, honestly, he's had one season where he didn't get hurt, and even that season he was banged up from time to time. You can by the time a kid is now, what is he, 23? The ship has sailed on terms of like, he is what he is. He'll continue to improve and maybe he'll learn to take better care of himself, but he's not going to drastically change. So yeah, he's always going to be a question mark. But in terms of this season, no, I think Areola is not 30 yet. He just looks like a guy who hadn't played in a couple of months, which is what was true. He'll get it back. I think he'll be fine. Ibiaga also over 30, so we've finally seen Leggett waking up. There's some spots. Martinez is hurt all the time. There's some spots that aren't great, but just like every year, at the end of the year, there'll be five or six guys that'll leave. There'll be some more guys that'll come in. They'll freshen it up. They'll get younger. I don't know that this was an MLS Cup season anyway. So like, if you're worried about that, I wouldn't be worried about it. This was never going to be a Cup season, not without pure luck. you just hope they get better from time to time and can keep Jesus.
All right. Now, Mark asked a second question that was a lot like Jeff Tepper's one question, so we're going to give this credit to Jeff. I've read this is like my dyslexia. I thought initially this said from my half-year-old son, RJ, which was like,
12-year-old.
wow, your kid. Yes. It's so weird. his 6-month-old baby wondering about FC Dallas questions in the League Cup. RJ, his kid, asked, do you think that the good play Dallas had in the League's Cup will carry over into the MLS season?
I do. For these guys, for pros, games are games. The League's Cup had a little bit of pressure in the sense that, like, if you lost, you were eliminated. That part was a little bit of a pressure. But now that they've dropped below the playoff line, they're going to feel that same sort of pressure. They're going to recognize they need to turn the form up. So that part will stay the same. The Velasco and the midfield thing looks legit. That looks like he's made that migration and that mentality change that he needs for the middle. Coach talked about when he first came here, he didn't know what to do in that kind of spot, but now he does. So I think you'll see that continuing. There's actually optimism that it'll get even better if the Jet's awakening continues and Areola comes back to form. It could improve even more. I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about the back half of this season. Still not a cup team, as I just said, but I think you should see them climb the rankings. I expect them to climb the rankings to get back up, to fifth and up somewhere in that neck of the woods.
All right, next up is somebody with a name that I hope is actually their name, Tavo Poblano. And they ask, with the rumblings of increasing the cap and or adding a fourth DP spot, hence the earlier conversation, how could we expect the club to make use of it? Giggle, snort, giggle, snort.
Yeah, well, the FC Dallas is going to be FC Dallas. So there's not going to be a $5, $10, $15 million player ever. You'll see. Yeah.
Can I throw in a comment about that?
Yeah.
Because part of the problem with that is you've got to find a player of that quality worth that price that wants to come live in Dallas.
Yeah.
And I do think there is a ceiling in which we all as Dallas fans, many of us got used to a long time ago, but newer fans just have to. The only way you break that ceiling is by money whipping a player. And the Hunts are never going to money whip a player to the degree that they're willing to come play somewhere they really didn't want to when they could go to L.A. or Miami or New York.
Put yourself in the mentality of a player from another country. Dallas isn't necessarily very sexy in terms of a place to live. Now, people that come here and live here love it here. You see baseball players all the time that play for the Rangers and stay. We've seen lots of players come through FC Dallas and choose to stay and have their families here. So it is a nice place to be. Don't get me wrong. But it doesn't have the sex appeal of Miami, LA, New York, Toronto, Chicago. Those places have a lot more appeal. But the shorter answer is that the Hunts will do what they always do, which is like if they have the capability of using a fourth DP, they'll use it just like they use all the other DPs, which is a player that could be bought down up to sort of the Jesus range, right? The most we've seen is Franco Jara on $3 million, and that backfired like a Danielson backfired. Overpaid and you get wrecked. So you'll see your $1 to $2 million kind of players just like we do now with Velasco and Jesus Ferreira and Areola. It'll be another player like that, and it'll be the positions we talk about, center back, 6. Unless Jesus goes, then it'll be a 9, but then you'd have another DP spot to fill. Tigers don't change their stripes, right? The Hunts are who they are. They're not going to change their ways, and go buy a $10 million player. It's not going to happen.
All right. The good old Pappy Check, author and performer and artist of the theme song of Third Degree, the podcast, checked in with multiple questions, and we probably owe him an apology for not asking his questions right off the bat, or maybe second to El Jefe. But here we go. First off, number one, what do you think about Junka at right back, at least in games where FCD knows they will be defending?
He's quite good, obviously. Where that'll come into play is as they go forward. Does he have enough value as a backup on that side that you can, make him move out maybe a couple of young guys and go with just a Smith or just an Endele perhaps behind Giovanni? You can look at those options like that. So I think Juka's quite good. Automatically you pick him up for sure. I don't know that coach will ever want to start him on the right, even though Sam, consistently, even though Sam would probably like that, because he likes to be on that opposite side like that. But he is absolutely a good roster piece that they'll keep a hold of for a long time, probably.
Yeah, I think we all agreed he was probably the biggest surprise of the season.
Yeah.
Next question was, do you believe Mulatto will be ever be an attacking option or in the rotation for Dallas, if not starting at 9?
No.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, when I watch him play in MLS training, and when I watch him go down to North Texas, again, this comes back to my Ruben Luna thing. He's capable of scoring some really good goals, as was Ruben. But from time to time, you need to have a little bit of individual something to be able to create space. And he lacks a little bit of that. He's a little bit too big bodied, a little bit too plondering. That's not the right word. Plotting for MLS. So that's a no for me.
Anybody on North Texas that sticks out to you that are not named Norris, Mulatto, Endeley, or Carrera?
Yeah, Tyshawn Rose was doing a nice work at left back. He's the kid from Boston College, I think it is, until he got hurt the other day. Hope of Vayu is probably going to be signed, I would bet, this winter, not to get ahead of things. The two kids in midfield, Zura and Diego Garcia, are both really nice. They're both like 15, 16 years old, so don't worry about them for a couple of years, but they're both interesting. Some other academy guys, but there's definitely some talent there worth talking about other than just those 4 he mentioned.
Okay. I'm going to save Pappy Check's last question. Oh, I'm sorry. No, he had 2 more. Here's the next to last question. I'm going to save his last one for the last question overall. His next to last question is, will either Carrera or Eyestone ever be the starting keeper for FC Dallas?
Yep. Yeah, they will. Because Pazl eventually will be sold, and Jimmy's 38, 53, 64, whatever he is. So, yeah. If Eyestone signs, and Carrera for sure will be, and if Eyestone signs, he will be too.
Okay. Again, I'm going to save Pappy's last question for last. FCD 96 is the last person, though. And he has a long question, which is, you have sort of touched on this in bits and pieces, but I would be interested in a full review, Buzz, a full white paper and report of what happened with all that damned transfer fee money they've made these last few years. Some went to guys like Leggett, Areola, and Velasco, but it sure feels like Dallas has a stack of cash to spend this offseason just from past sales.
Yeah, no, they didn't. The thing about TAM and GAM and all that funny money is that it expires. It runs out. You don't get to keep it forever. And the other part of it is that they use it all.
Transfer, specifically the money they made off of Pepe.
Yeah, like the cash for Pepe is still around. The mechanic money, the TAM and GAM, this is again stupid MLS rules. That stuff is not nearly as much as the actual money. So like if you sold him for 20, you could get like $2 million to actually do stuff with, right? Now, in terms of the Hunts and their willingness to spend money, that money could have gone to them buying a player for 5 or 10. But they didn't do that. They used some of it on Velasco in terms of the raw $9 million or $7 million or whatever it was. They gave a lot of raises inside the organization. They've upped the spending on the budgets across the board. That's where all the Pepe money went. But you're asking about the funny money, the TAM and the GAM. That stuff is number one. There's not nearly as much of it as you think, even though Dallas had a lot. They spent it all. They spent $2 million of it on Areola and broke the league record. They spent a bunch more of it to get Leggett. They use a bunch of it to buy down guys. Like they still have 6 or 7 players that qualify at DPs, and only 3 of them are DPs. It's because they buy down all those salaries. Sometimes they get used to acquire players and buy down in terms of transfers. Sometimes it gets used to buy down little bitty chunks of the roster. Like if you have a kid that's making a homegrown contract of 130 and you want him to be on the developmental roster. So this is coming to stupid rules again. You might need to spend 50 of that in that position. So it gets eaten up, and the moves they made this summer, moving Surreal for a big chunk of that stuff was a really good move. That gave them a little bit of flexibility to bring in, Liam and Yara, and if they have the qualifiers on Surreal kick in, you'll get a little bit more, part of it is that really just is how it is. Like every year you get a little bit more, every year you got to sell players. So this winter they'll have some more again. They'll be able to do stuff again, but they were just out of it. And I can't give you the bottom line on every single dollar. I can just point to a lot of the various little places it went and some of the big places it went. And I was pretty sure they were out of it. And the fact that they didn't do anything until they moved Cerrillo shows you that I was probably right about that, because Yara was free and Liam, they had to trade to get him. So they needed a little bit for that, And I would bet money without looking that Yara's salary will be above the DP level, and they'd have to buy him down too.
All right, so back to Pappy Check's last question, and this will be the final question in our question and answer session, which is, Buzz, your second half, well, we're past the second half, but the rest of the season, Dallas predictions, conference winners, and finals.
All right, I still think FC Dallas will finish 5th, which is what I said at the beginning of the season. So you're not going to get a home game, unfortunately, in the playoffs, which means that at best you have a 50-50 shot to get out of the first round, and I think it's not very likely, because you'll have to go on the road. And even though this team can give themselves a shot, it's not a very high percentage shot with the way they play on the road. So I'm going to stick with my preseason pick of FC Cincinnati winning MLS Cup over LAFC, because Cincy will win the Supporters Shield, and they'll play the final in Cincinnati, and they'll be able to hold off LAFC in Cincinnati.
Very good. All right. Well, that was a fun experiment to do question and answers. We've not done that before, and that was fun to do.
Well, Dan and I usually end up having to do it in the winter when you're not around as much. We've done it. I've done a couple by myself. It was fun to have you guys all around for one.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Well, Buzz, I think we've done enough. Hopefully, Dan will be able to join us next week when we actually have games to talk about. We'll have two games to talk about.
2 games.
Yeah. Two games.
That was my count.
I like your count impersonation.
Thanks.
We'll have to get you to do that more often, Buzz. How many goals did Dallas score in the last game, Buzz?
2. Do you watch Murders in the Building?
Yes, of course.
I'm up to the part of this current season where he's trying to turn the play into a musical.
Yes.
And the song about vampires made me think of Forgetting Sarah Marshall when he has the Count Dracula puppet doing this.
That's right.
Sorry.
Yes, that's
diversion.
a very niche insider thing.
I mean,
Okay.
come on. Forgetting Sarah Marshall's a classic.
Okay. Well, I hadn't thought of that movie in a billion years.
So good.
Very good. All right.
Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by Soccer90.com. They're the ultimate destination for FC Dallas North Texas Soccer Club and all the European gear. You can check out all the latest stuff. Maybe they even got that brand new, cool Marvel Children's Kick Cancer month coming up. Pre-game warm-up jersey. That thing's pretty sweet. If you haven't seen it yet, go check that out. I butchered what that thing's actually called. Podcast listeners get 20% off when you use the code 3rd Degree at checkout. Some exclusions apply. Soccer90.com. Love you.
Thank you, Buzz. It's always
thank
fun
you.
to talk this stuff with you. We went way longer than I anticipated, but we got it knocked out, and everybody will have it.
Somebody kept derailing earlier in the show.
Yeah, it's my fault. Well, hopefully, Buzz, the podcast is posted by 12.
I imagine it will be.
Okay. Thank you, Buzz, and thank you, FC Dallas Curious Fan. We will speak to you next week on another episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
Where's Dan?
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.